She becomes my queen consort.
And I felt, you're losing people every single time you have those headlines. We all get that there's a really big urgent message.
Palace insiders were stunned when Prince William allegedly activated a royal order, giving him exclusive control of Queen Elizabeth's hidden £200 million estate, while permanently freezing out Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles. Some believe the Queen planned this for years. Others claim it was a ruthless power move designed to protect the monarchy from influence and interference. Behind closed doors, tensions exploded as secret clauses and inheritance restrictions surfaced. But what exactly forced William to act now? And what do you think? Was William protecting the legacy or abusing power? Share your thoughts below, but also don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Hidden order shocks royal household. Buckingham Palace released the announcement quietly, but the reaction inside royal circles was immediate. Behind the formal language and carefully measured statements was a decision that stunned even longtime palace staff. Prince William had officially taken exclusive control of a hidden £200 million estate structure tied to Queen Elizabeth II, and according to internal sources, the order came with a restriction far more explosive than the inheritance itself. Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, had allegedly been permanently blocked from any advisory role, operational access, or future involvement connected to the estate network. The directive was not part of a normal royal transition. It reportedly emerged from sealed legal instructions prepared privately by the late Queen years earlier, and activated only after specific succession conditions had been met. Several palace aides later described the move as cold, deliberate, and impossible to challenge. One insider reportedly used a single word to describe the restrictions surrounding the estate after William's authorization: irreversible. What made the situation even more unsettling was how little the public knew about the property itself. The estate had never been openly discussed alongside royal holdings like Balmoral or Sandringham. Instead, it existed in near silence, protected through private covenants and legal barriers that kept its ownership hidden from ordinary royal records. When details finally surfaced, the scale of the inheritance immediately triggered speculation about why Queen Elizabeth believed such extreme protections were necessary. Within hours of the announcement, security protocols surrounding the estate reportedly changed. Access permissions were reviewed, archive records were restricted, and administrative oversight shifted directly under William's authority. Palace insiders claimed the transition had been prepared long before the public learned it existed. Some even believed William had quietly worked alongside the Queen for years, studying the estate and understanding responsibilities few others inside the family fully understood. But attention quickly turned toward Tom Parker Bowles. Rumors spread that his exclusion was not symbolic, but intentional. Questions began circulating across royal circles about whether previous commercial interests connected to heritage branding and luxury ventures had alarmed the Queen before her death. Supporters of Camilla privately viewed the move as unnecessarily severe, arguing that Tom had no constitutional role and posed no genuine threat to royal stability. Others disagreed completely. They believed the Queen saw certain financial ambitions as incompatible with the long-term protection of royal legacy. Inside the palace, the atmosphere reportedly became tense and deeply uncomfortable. Senior figures avoided public discussion, while legal advisors reviewed confidential documents connected to the transfer. Yet the silence itself only intensified the mystery. William now controlled a hidden royal empire protected by the Queen's final instructions, while Tom stood completely outside its gates. And for many watching the monarchy closely, the most troubling question was no longer what William inherited, but why Queen Elizabeth believed such a permanent ban was ever necessary. The deeper investigators examined the transfer, the clearer it became that this inheritance battle concealed something far more personal beneath the surface of official documents and legal procedures. What initially appeared to be a straightforward dispute over control of a hidden royal estate slowly unfolded into a complex web of emotional history, private loyalties, and long-standing tensions within the royal household. Each new detail raised more questions than answers, suggesting that the decisions being made were not only about wealth or power, but about trust, legacy, and deeply personal choices that shaped the future direction of the monarchy itself. Why did the Queen secretly shield this fortune until now? What exactly terrified palace lawyers enough to act overnight? And why are insiders suddenly warning Camilla that reopening the matter could expose decades of buried royal tensions? Let's find out. Silent Clause changed everything. As palace officials continued managing the fallout from Prince William's sudden takeover of the hidden estate network, attention quietly shifted toward the legal mechanism that made it possible in the first place. What investigators and royal correspondents gradually uncovered was even more unsettling than the transfer itself. The estate did not operate under normal crown estate structures, nor did it fall directly under traditional succession procedures. Instead, it existed inside a protected private covenant created personally by Queen Elizabeth II and sealed years before her death. According to sources familiar with the arrangement, the covenant contained handwritten instructions stored separately from the Queen's public records. The language reportedly stunned several royal archivists when the documents were finally reviewed. Hidden among the legal terms was a condition many interpreted as a direct warning. The clause allegedly restricted influence from what the Queen described as non-direct legacy interests, wording so unusual and carefully chosen that palace advisors immediately understood its implications. Although no individual was publicly named, many believed the restriction pointed directly toward figures outside the core line of succession, including Tom Parker Bowles. The discovery changed the entire meaning of William's inheritance. What initially appeared to be a sudden power move now looked more like the final stage of a plan the Queen had quietly prepared over many years. Palace staff later revealed that between 2017 and 2021, William made several discreet visits to properties connected to the estate. These trips were rarely placed on official schedules and drew little public attention at the time. Behind closed gates, however, the Queen reportedly walked William through archive chambers, wartime records, and private collections tied to the monarchy's hidden history. Those visits now appeared deeply significant. Former aides claimed William was not simply observing the estate, but learning how to protect it. He reportedly reviewed confidential documents, discussed preservation strategies, and studied the legal structures surrounding the covenant itself. To some inside royal circles, it looked less like preparation for inheritance and more like preparation for a long-anticipated conflict. Suspicion quickly spread through palace corridors. Why would Queen Elizabeth believe such rigid restrictions were necessary unless she feared future interference? Supporters of Camilla privately argued that the wording was being exaggerated by insiders loyal to William. Others believed the Queen had become increasingly worried about commercial interests drifting too close to royal heritage. Even royal archivists reportedly struggled to hide their shock after reviewing the Queen's handwritten annotations. One note allegedly described stewardship as protection from ambition disguised as service. The sentence circulated quietly among senior staff and intensified speculation that the Queen had anticipated future attempts to influence the estate long before the public ever heard its name. By the time William formally activated the covenant, the inheritance no longer appeared to be a routine transfer of wealth or property.
And I don't think either of those two could have been able to cope. They'd been anywhere else. And that was the only good thing that happened, was that they were there.
It looked like a carefully engineered defense system built by a monarch who had spent decades studying the strengths, weaknesses, and ambitions inside her own family.
The ability to have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for has always been a major ambition.
Why did the Queen quietly prepare William years before anyone suspected a battle was coming? What terrifying phrase left royal archivists speechless? And what exactly happened during those secret private meetings no outsider was meant to witness? Keep watching. Profits threatened royal family legacy. Questions surrounding Tom Parker Bowles grew far more serious after investigators began examining proposals allegedly connected to the Queen's hidden estate network. What first appeared to be harmless business conversations slowly evolved into something that alarmed senior palace figures behind closed doors. According to internal sources, several development concepts linked to luxury hospitality and heritage branding had quietly circulated among advisors connected to Camilla and Tom long before Prince William activated the sealed covenant. While none of the plans became official royal policy, their existence reportedly triggered deep concern within the late Queen's private circle. The proposals allegedly centered on transforming sections of protected royal property into profitable lifestyle ventures aimed at wealthy international clients. One idea reportedly involved exclusive countryside retreats built around royal heritage experiences, while another explored premium food branding tied to estate farmland and historic Windsor associations. Foreign investors from the Middle East and parts of Europe were also rumored to have expressed interest in potential partnerships connected to the project. To supporters, the concepts represented modernization and financial opportunity. To critics inside the palace, they represented something far more dangerous. Senior aides reportedly feared the monarchy was drifting toward commercialization in ways Queen Elizabeth had spent decades resisting. Several insiders later claimed the Queen became increasingly uncomfortable with discussions that treated royal legacy as marketable property instead of protected national heritage. The issue was not simply money. It was control, image, and the fear that centuries of tradition could eventually become vulnerable to branding strategies and outside influence. William reportedly viewed the situation through an entirely different lens than some members of the wider royal household. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, he believed the estate existed to preserve historical continuity, not generate private prestige or luxury expansion. As details about proposed hospitality ventures spread quietly through palace corridors, tensions allegedly increased between advisors loyal to different visions for the monarchy's future. Tom's defenders argued that many of the reported proposals were exploratory concepts rather than finalized plans. They insisted no laws had been broken and no official estate rights had ever been transferred. Yet suspicion continued growing because the Queen's covenant restrictions appeared unusually targeted. Critics questioned why such specific legal barriers would exist unless concerns had already reached the highest levels of the royal institution itself. The deeper palace officials examined the timeline, the more deliberate the Queen's actions appeared. Legal protections had been prepared years before public controversy erupted, suggesting Elizabeth may have anticipated future attempts to commercialize royal assets long before William formally inherited control. That realization changed everything. Tom Parker Bowles was no longer viewed merely as Camilla's son standing outside royal succession. He had become, fairly or unfairly, the figure many insiders believed forced the monarchy to defend its hidden legacy before it could be transformed into something the Queen never intended. And as pressure intensified behind palace walls, William's inheritance increasingly resembled a defensive operation rather than a routine family transition altogether. Inside Buckingham Palace, advisors reportedly saw each legal move as a protective barrier around Queen Elizabeth's hidden estate, with William acting less like a beneficiary and more like a cautious guardian than ever before now. Weighing silence from senior royals, the situation increasingly suggested a calculated shift toward controlled stewardship, raising deeper questions about power, trust, and the monarchy's long-term direction as well. Then whispers inside the palace turned darker. Did Tom secretly promise investors access to royal history itself? Why did William reportedly call the proposals dangerous? And what shocking detail buried inside confidential estate documents finally convinced the future king That someone had crossed an unforgivable line forever? Let's unravel the details. Silent transfers. Reshape royal power. The atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace changed once Prince William began activating the legal protections hidden inside Queen Elizabeth II's private covenant system. What had initially looked like a disputed inheritance quickly evolved into a controlled consolidation of power carried out with precision. Behind closed doors, emergency trust procedures were reportedly triggered almost immediately after the Queen's final instructions were verified. Senior legal advisors moved quietly through restricted meetings while confidential files were transferred under heightened security. According to palace insiders, the operation had clearly been rehearsed long before the public ever learned the estate existed. At the center of the transition stood Princess Anne. Sources familiar with the process claimed she played a critical role in reviewing sealed correspondence, authenticating handwritten directives, and helping oversee the legal transfer of authority to William. Her involvement carried enormous weight inside royal circles because Anne had long been viewed as one of the Queen's most trusted and disciplined confidants. Several aides later suggested her support ended internal debate over whether the covenant should be challenged or delayed. As the trust mechanisms activated, management control of the estate network reportedly shifted under William's authority. New oversight teams were installed across archival departments, land administration offices, and private estate operations. Existing advisors connected to previous proposals were quietly removed from sensitive discussions. Access to internal records became more restricted, and several review procedures were tightened without public explanation. To outside observers, almost nothing appeared unusual. Inside palace walls, however, the balance of influence was rapidly changing. What made the situation even more striking was William's refusal to publicly defend his actions. He issued no dramatic statements and avoided direct confrontation with Camilla or Tom Parker Bowles. Instead, he relied on the legal framework left behind by Queen Elizabeth herself. Palace staff reportedly viewed the silence as strategic. William seemed determined to let the Queen's documents speak for him rather than escalate tensions through public arguments or media battles. At the same time, resistance inside royal circles slowly began collapsing. Some figures who initially questioned the severity of the restrictions reportedly backed away after reviewing the covenant language more closely. Others feared that opposing the transfer would appear disrespectful to the late Queen's carefully documented wishes. Even advisors sympathetic to Camilla privately admitted the legal protections surrounding the estate appeared extraordinarily difficult to challenge. The deeper the transition unfolded, the clearer one reality became. William was no longer operating merely as an heir receiving inherited property. He was acting as the active guardian of a hidden royal structure designed to survive pressure, ambition, and internal division. Supporters described his approach as disciplined stewardship. Critics viewed it as calculated consolidation of influence inside the monarchy itself. Yet beneath the controlled legal process, unease continued spreading through palace corridors. The Queen had not simply handed William a fortune, she had handed him authority, protection, and the power to decide who remained inside the gates of royal legacy and who would remain outside them. Insiders reportedly viewed this shift as a turning point in modern royal control, where tradition and authority quietly collided, leaving senior figures uncertain about future influence, internal balance, and the long-term direction of the monarchy itself moving forward now. Hidden signatures were already changing everything behind palace walls. But who was still fighting William's silent takeover? Why were longtime allies suddenly disappearing from key decisions? And what shocking discovery inside the Queen's private estate files could trigger the royal family's most dangerous battle yet? Stay tuned. Frozen smiles inside palace walls. The mood inside the royal household reportedly changed almost overnight after Prince William secured formal control of Queen Elizabeth II's hidden estate structure. What had once been discussed quietly behind closed doors was now becoming impossible to ignore. According to palace insiders, a series of tense private meetings began unfolding between senior advisors connected to both William and Queen Camilla. Officially, nothing was wrong. Public appearances remained carefully managed, statements stayed measured, and the palace continued projecting calm stability. Behind the scenes, however, relationships inside the monarchy were reportedly becoming deeply strained. Sources familiar with the aftermath claimed Camilla immediately sought legal clarification regarding the covenant restrictions attached to the estate. Advisors were reportedly instructed to examine every clause, every trust condition, and every procedural detail for possible loopholes that might weaken William's exclusive authority. Yet the deeper lawyers looked, the more difficult the situation appeared. The Queen's legal protections were not broad or vague. They were detailed, layered, and carefully constructed to survive future disputes. That realization reportedly hit particularly hard once additional restrictions connected to succession rights became clearer. Palace sources claimed some provisions extended beyond the immediate transfer itself and limited future influence from individuals outside the direct hereditary line tied to the estate's stewardship. Although the wording remained confidential, insiders allegedly understood the implications immediately. To many observers, it appeared Queen Elizabeth had anticipated resistance long before her death and quietly designed the covenant to block it. Rumors of growing confrontation between royal households soon spread through palace corridors. Staff members reportedly described the atmosphere as ice-cold, with communication becoming formal, cautious, and increasingly distant. Even routine discussions were said to carry underlying tension. Some insiders believed the conflict had moved far beyond inheritance and entered deeply personal territory involving trust, legitimacy, and influence over the monarchy's future direction. King Charles reportedly found himself trapped in an impossible position. On one side stood his wife and her son, frustrated by restrictions they viewed as severe and humiliating. On the other stood William, acting under the direct authority of the late Queen's documented wishes. According to several palace figures, Charles avoided direct involvement whenever possible, aware that any public alignment could deepen divisions already threatening the family's fragile balance. At the center of the crisis remained a painful suspicion that continued growing stronger with every new revelation. The estate structure did not merely protect William's inheritance. It appeared specifically designed to outmaneuver potential influence before it could ever take hold. Whether Queen Elizabeth intended that outcome explicitly or simply feared future commercialization remains fiercely debated inside royal circles. But one reality was becoming impossible for palace insiders to deny. The Queen's final strategy had transformed a private inheritance into one of the most emotionally charged power struggles the modern monarchy had faced in years. And as advisors continued studying sealed documents late into the night, many inside Buckingham Palace wondered whether the battle over the hidden estate was only beginning. Behind closed palace doors, whispers suddenly turned dangerous. Did Camilla uncover a hidden clause capable of destroying her final influence forever? What shocking move forced Charles into silence? Inside the monarchy, alliances were collapsing fast, and someone was preparing for war. Queen's Fortress, finally fully sealed. By the time Prince William completed the final phase of the estate transfer, palace insiders reportedly understood that Queen Elizabeth II's hidden strategy had reached its intended conclusion. The legal protections surrounding the £200 million estate were no longer temporary safeguards created during a sensitive transition. They had become permanent structural barriers designed to prevent future interference, commercial influence, or internal negotiation. According to sources familiar with the covenant documents, William formally enforced the Queen's final directives through a series of tightly controlled legal actions carried out without public ceremony or official celebration. At the center of the lockdown were permanent anti-commercial clauses that allegedly removed any possibility of transforming the estate into a hospitality brand, luxury retreat, or private investment venture. The language within the covenant reportedly prohibited future reclassification efforts, restricted external partnerships, and prevented commercial licensing tied to the estate's historical identity. Several palace advisors privately admitted the protections were among the most comprehensive they had ever seen attached to private royal property. The estate itself was then placed under what insiders described as ethical stewardship directives personally approved by Queen Elizabeth before her death. Rather than prioritizing profitability or expansion, the framework focused on preservation, historical continuity, and long-term royal responsibility. Financial structures connected to the estate were reportedly reorganized to protect assets from future disputes, succession complications, or outside commercial claims. Legal experts examining the arrangement quietly acknowledged that reversing the system would now be extraordinarily difficult, without directly challenging the late Queen's documented intentions. At the same time, Tom Parker Bowles allegedly found his remaining business connections to the estate completely severed. Individuals previously linked to hospitality discussions or branding proposals were reportedly removed from advisory channels as oversight teams tightened operational control. While no public accusations were made against Tom personally, palace insiders claimed the restrictions surrounding his involvement became absolute. To supporters of William, the measures reflected necessary protection of royal legacy. To critics, the response still appeared unusually severe and deeply personal. Yet perhaps the most revealing aspect of the entire situation was the silence surrounding it. Buckingham Palace avoided public confrontation entirely. No senior royal openly addressed the growing controversy, and no formal explanation was offered regarding the Queen's restrictive covenant language. That silence only fueled suspicion that deeper tensions remained hidden beneath the surface. Within royal circles, many believed the palace feared further public attention could expose divisions the monarchy desperately wanted contained. Amid the legal restructuring, William reportedly made several quiet visits to the estate, accompanied by Catherine and their children. Photographs captured from a distance showed the family walking through isolated grounds without press events or staged appearances. To some observers, the visits appeared symbolic rather than political. William was not presenting himself as a triumphant heir. He seemed to be reinforcing the exact image Queen Elizabeth had intended: stewardship, continuity, and controlled restraint. By then, the larger meaning of the Queen's covenant was becoming impossible to ignore. She had not simply protected land, wealth, or property. She had built a lasting barrier against the very future she feared could eventually reshape the monarchy itself forever. Why were palace insiders suddenly warned to stay away from the estate? What secret clause reportedly terrified Tom's closest allies? And during William's final visit with Catherine and the children, what unexpected discovery quietly convinced royal observers that the Queen's strategy may have just begun? Stay glued. Elizabeth's final gamble changed everything. In the final weeks before the hidden estate transfer became irreversible, palace insiders reportedly began understanding the true purpose behind Queen Elizabeth II's private covenant. For years, many believed the estate existed simply as a protected reserve of royal wealth, hidden from public attention. But once Prince William secured full authority over the structure, a different picture slowly emerged. According to figures familiar with the Queen's planning, the estate had never been about money alone. It represented her final attempt to shape the monarchy's future after her death. The deeper advisors studied the covenant, the clearer the Queen's priorities became. She reportedly feared that growing public distrust, celebrity culture, and commercial influence could eventually weaken the institution she had spent her entire life defending. Palace aides claimed she worried that royal heritage might slowly transform into a marketable brand controlled by outside interests, rather than protected as a national symbol. Those concerns allegedly intensified during private discussions surrounding luxury partnerships and branding proposals connected to the estate years earlier. That fear appeared to explain why William was trusted above others inside the royal family. Sources close to the palace claimed the Queen viewed him as disciplined, cautious, and deeply protective of royal continuity. Unlike advisors interested in modernization through commercial expansion, William reportedly believed the monarchy survived through restraint, duty, and controlled distance from private profit. Several former staff members later suggested the Queen saw those qualities as essential if the institution hoped to survive future generations. As the transfer became final, the estate itself began taking on symbolic meaning far beyond its financial value. To supporters of William, it represented the preservation of tradition during a period of internal uncertainty and public scrutiny. To critics, however, the covenant still looked like an unusually harsh mechanism designed to exclude Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles from influence permanently. That division never fully disappeared. Even inside royal circles, some questioned whether the Queen's protections reflected wise planning or deep personal mistrust. Yet William's role inside the story had clearly changed. He was no longer simply inheriting hidden land, protected archives, and private holdings. He was inheriting responsibility for the Queen's final vision of stewardship. Palace insiders repeatedly returned to that word because it appeared throughout the covenant itself. Stewardship did not mean ownership in the traditional sense. It meant protection, restraint, and long-term responsibility for something expected to outlive personal ambition. For Camilla and Tom, the consequences of the Queen's final decision reportedly remained painful and lasting. The restrictions attached to the estate ensured that certain doors inside the monarchy would never fully reopen. And as silence continued surrounding the covenant's deepest secrets, many observers reached the same unsettling conclusion. Beneath the legal documents and hidden fortunes, Queen Elizabeth had quietly carried out a final transfer of power designed to shape the monarchy long after she was gone. What appeared to be an inheritance dispute now resembled a carefully controlled battle over the monarchy's identity itself. So, what do you think? Was William protecting Queen Elizabeth's legacy, or unfairly shutting Camilla's son out forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal stories and secrets.